Well, welcome back. It's 2022, and it's just great that we can start again our East Meets West Global Growth Leaders podcast. We ran this, Henry, Wang, and I. Henry's based over in Hong Kong. I'm Simon Haigh, based here in Ireland. We ran this very successful series back in 2020, and we've decided to come together and do it again. And today we're going to start with a very, probably no more important subject than climate change. And I realize, even though Henry is my co-interviewer on the podcast, there's no better person to ask than Henry Wang. He is an expert in the subject. So, Henry, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Simon. It's wonderful to co-host a new series of East Meet West Growth Leaders after our successful first series in 2020. Yeah, and I agree with you. Climate change is a very important topic globally at the moment.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know Henry, Henry Wang is an international executive, author and speaker with extensive high-level business experience globally. He's president of Gate International and was a former director of both Shell China and SABIC in Riyadh, SABIC in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He's a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts and a fellow of the Institute of Chemical Engineering. He's a board member of London University School of Oriental and African Studies Advisory Board and University College London China Advisory Board, plus China Carbon Forum Advisory Board. He's been invited to join the G20, B20 Global Leaders Task Force, which we'll talk about, and that's a huge honor, Henry. He's published over 100 papers and speeches, plus 5 books globally. His negotiation paper was selected as one of the top 5 UK management papers of the year. He's been invited to speak at numerous international conferences, leading universities, and I've seen him in action at Imperial College in London. I was one of his people in the audience watching him in excellent action. Also business schools globally. He's also undertaking charity work on leadership and sustainability globally. Henry, that's quite a career. And, it's wonderful that you've been invited to join the G20/B20 task force, really important, and various climate boards globally. Maybe just give us a bit more of an overview of your amazingly distinguished career.
Well, thank you very much, Simon. You're too kind. I was the corporate director for about 30 to 40 years in Europe, in China, in Asia, and in the Middle East. And I thought that I've been lucky, so it's important to give something back to the world and make the world a better place. So now I've set up my own company, and then we're advising international organizations, leading universities, and also publishing books and papers, and doing charity works in youth developments globally, particularly also in the climate change area.
That's wonderful, Henry. And you really do so many different things, and also you're very friendly and helpful to others, which it's inspiring, and well done on being invited to join the G20 B20 International Task Force. It's very important, and it's a huge accolade for you. What would you say are your key activities and outcomes on that task force?
Thank you, Simon. Yes, it's a great honor to be invited to join the G20 and B20 task force. I was first invited by the B20 presidency of Saudi Arabia in 2020 to join their task force. And we successfully prepared our recommendations and proposal to the G20 leaders. After that, the G20 presidency of Italy invited me to join their task force. And last year, because of COVID, we met mostly really virtually online with global experts and leaders from all over the world. And we managed to prepare our recommendations to the G20 leaders for their G20 meeting in Italy at the end of 2021. And I'm very honored that I've just been invited by the new G20 presidency of Indonesia to join their task force. And we shall be preparing our proposal to the G20 leaders at the end of this year. Then it is going to be held in Bali. And
Wow.
depending on COVID, hopefully it can be a physical meeting.
Hopefully, you know, and that's wonderful. I mean, Indonesia is a huge player as well on the global stage. So that's another huge accolade. And how would you see different regions globally seizing the initiatives for climate change?
Well, I think climate change, different regions and different countries are beginning to understand the importance of climate change, and they are seizing the opportunity to work together. And a very good example of this was happened during the COP26 in Glasgow, when over 150 countries agreed on, you know, they had a lot of debates and discussions, and we saw it on TV, and not everything was agreed, but in the end, they agreed, 150 countries agreed on the new Glasgow Agreement, which agreed that they will work together to reduce, to improve climate change and to reduce carbon emission by 2030. I think that's very important. And I mean, key countries, in addition to that, key countries, you know, like US and China had special agreement where they agreed to work together, despite their disagreement on trade issues and things like that on climate change. And I think that is very healthy. And we look forward to really more international cooperations and actions together, because this is really, really one of the most important issues in the world. And in G20, in our G20, B20 task force, we have studied this we were commissioned by the global leader, G20 leaders, to study the impact on global GDP if no actions were done in climate change. And we've published our results and advised the G20 leaders, which is that if no actions were done by the end of this century, you know, some 30 to 40% of the world GDP could be damaged by climate change. And we're already seeing that. You know, we're already seeing woodland fires, we're seeing droughts, we have snowstorms, you know, and glacier melting, flooding, droughts, and things like that are happening around the world. And if we do nothing on climate change, things will get even worse.
Yeah, no,
and that's why I think the leaders agreed to work together.
No, absolutely. There is no, I don't think there's any more important subject than climate change. And the work you're doing, you know, is wonderful. And, you know, education, I've mentioned briefly education, but how important is climate change education to promote climate change action?
I think that is a very important area. And thank you for mentioning the work that we did with, I did with the Imperial College. I've been supporting their work for a long time. And they were one of I'm very happy that they are one of the top 10 universities in the world. And their course on climate finance was one of the first in the world. And is hugely oversubscribed by you know, young people who are enthusiastic about climate change. And I've been really very, very happy to be lecturing to them and also joining them on some of their activities. You know, one memorable one, let me give you an example. One was the lecture we gave to the MSc students there when they talk about the different ideas, but they invited me to a joint meeting really between Imperial and Cambridge on the presentation by their students on some of their work, together with city bankers and investment bankers and green financiers from all over the world. I mean, some of the ideas that are proposed by the students really are fantastic. You know, let me give you an example. One group came up with an idea about solving the plastic problem and the climate change problem. You know, we've talked about carbon trading and things like that. And they came up with an idea of a plastic credit around the world, which will promote carbon trading, plastic trading, and also reduce plastic reduction. And this was fantastic, you know. And the wonderful thing is that they got offer, you know, one of the city investment banking group immediately saw the potential of this idea and offered them a job, which will, you know, and this is a wonderful example of the new amount of green finance and green jobs just are created by innovative thinking, especially by the young people.
No, you're right. And it's interesting, you know, the future of the world is in the hands of the younger generation. And just to plug, just to say that a good friend of mine, Ambassador Terry Earthwin Nichols from the States, and I are going to be starting a new podcast on the future of leadership. And Henry, we're hoping that you can be a special guest on that, one of our 4 special guests. And I think we'll probably talk about the importance of leadership in climate change. But anyway, so you've mentioned finance. How important is green finance for climate change actions?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak on your new leadership podcast, which I'll be honored to do. I know the good work that you and Ambassador Terry's been doing in this area, and I'll be very happy to support you on this.
Great.
Green finance is hugely important. I mean, it has really grown into a major area of global activities. I mean, one of the really impressive thing in Glasgow and during COP26 was that the leading finance institution around the world, controlling something like 150 trillion of investment, agree that they should all back green finance and green investment. I mean, that's phenomenal. And one of the key areas of green finance is green bonds. I mean, the City of London, when we first met in the City of London, I was very honored also to be involved with the green finance team. I mean, green finance, green bonds is one of the key activities now in the City of London, you know, and you know, China, US, France, UK are leading issuers of green bonds. For example, I mean, China last year in 2020, I think they issued something like $50 billion worth of green bonds. And in US in 2021, they issued something like over $500 billion of green bonds. And in addition to that, they have green sustainable finance, as green sustainable financial insurance type products, which are issued in Wall Street and also all the insurance companies. So, you know, you are really talking now a major financial product. And these will contribute significantly to reducing carbon, but emissions, reducing global warming, but also growing the global GDP without destroying it. You know, this is wonderful how green finance, and in addition, is creating millions and millions of jobs in this area. The investments in a good example is the over $1 trillion being invested in renewables. And the latest figures from the International Association of Renewable Energy have shown that this has created over 10 million new jobs around the world.
Yeah,
and that's wonderful.
No, it's wonderful. All this, you know, some people would be thinking to themselves, what's finance got to do with climate change? But basically, the way I see it, it's like the foundations below the building. If you don't have the right financial structures and economics in place, the chances of good climate change initiatives staying and being sticking and being sustainable are diminished. So this is essential, I think. And so Henry, just in the last couple of questions, what would you say would be the top 2 or 3 priorities for climate change led actions going forward? The top 2 or 3, and why? Why would you choose them?
I think the top 2. Thank you. That's very important. And I think the top 2 or 3. let me start. The first very important one is really international effort, joint effort on the climate change. And I think the US-China example agreement is a very climate change example at Glasgow is a very good one where they overcome their differences in trade differences, but agree to work together on climate change because so much innovation, this could involve, you know, sharing works on innovations on solar, on wind, on green energy, on electric cars. I think this is very important area. Another very important area is really in trees. Trees now, one of the big things coming out of Glasgow is really 130 countries agreed to work together to end or reverse deforestation, because trees are really a wonderful natural solution for carbon removal and absorption and elimination. I mean, they've been doing their work for the thousands of years, but because of economic pressures, the deforestation has been going on. But now people realize that they can do sustainable forestation. You know, this will contribute to growing trees sustainably, but at the same time, you know, being able to use trees and other products to in a sustainable way. For example, a very good example that Philippines is doing is bamboo, growing bamboo for sustainably. And you know, you can use bamboo to make paper and other things. And that is wonderful. A lot of innovations are happening in this area.
Yeah.
And then the third area is really green finance. And it is great that, you know, all these companies, 150 countries in the world agree to work together to reduce climate change, to set stronger targets. And this is very important to achieve all this. Green investments and green finance are very, very important. And a lot of governments are now leading the way by issuing green bonds, which are very attractive, and it helps to promote green investment in their country.
Yeah, wow. You know, there's so much going on, but I think you've summarized 3 really core critical issues, and that was wonderful. And just bringing this to an end, given that we're relaunching our East Meets West Global Growth Leaders podcast, and we've got some fantastic guests lined up during the course of 2022, how can various climate change organizations in the East and the West collaborate better globally?
Yeah, I think it is very important that the various climate organizations in the East and West collaborate more through international cooperation, by exchanging information, and also very importantly, something we talked about, by education of the future leaders, the youth, and that sort of area. And, you know, good example, let me share a few good examples of international East and West cooperation. I mean, a very good example is really, you know, in climate risk reporting and ESG. Everybody talk about ESG now, which stands for environment, social, governance. And in these areas, you know, the various stock exchanges, leading stock exchanges in the world has been issuing new guidelines for their leading companies that they got to improve their ESG reporting. And they have made it mandatory really in many stock markets in the world, like London, like New York, like Hong Kong, it's mandatory that the leading public listed companies have to improve their ESG reporting. But that's a huge area of education for and exchange of how to work on this and improve on this. And you know, and the G20 leaders have commissioned the task force for climate reporting, and some of their outcomes in this area to improve the global standards in climate reporting and ESG reporting, I think will be hugely important. And it's a great area for international cooperation because this improves transparency, improves reporting by company forces the private companies and also governments to do better and to use international standards to improve climate change and to improve their ESG. This is great.
No, you're wonderful, and there's so much opportunity, and you articulate this so well, Henry. You know, you break down what is quite a complicated and very busy subject, something that a lot of people avoid because there's so much to it. You break it down so well. So that was a fascinating conversation and a great start to our 2022 East Meets West Global Growth Leaders podcast. Henry, how do people find out more about you? Is it through LinkedIn, or how do people find out more about your work?
Yeah, they can find out in LinkedIn and also WeChat and Twitter and Facebook. I publish. I use all the social medias.
Perfect. Henry, thanks so much, and I look forward to doing. I think we're doing another 11 podcasts during the year with some amazing guests from the East and the West. And our aim for the audience is really to demonstrate that, you know, that the growth starts with all of us, you know, and we're all on this planet together. As you can see up there, you know, it's not a huge planet, and we all have a responsibility to work together and to build a better future. Henry, thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. I agree fully with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.